So this paper is presented by Dr. Pat Munday, Dr. Chen, and not present here is Dr. John Carricker. So Dr. Pat Munday is a professor of Science and Technology Studies with Montana Tech in Butte. Dr. Munday has published on a large range of topics in history, philosophy, and communication. Publications on Chinese history and culture including the journal article, Coming Home to China, Margaret Wu's Stories, co-author with Chen, Brazil, and the book chapter, This Too is China, Hui Muslim Culture and the Fulbright Experience is Ningxia University. Okay, and Dr. Chen, Brazil is an assistant professor of communications in the Department of Interdisciplinary Arts and Sciences at Montana Tech, and a Chinese-American scholar. She holds a PhD in higher education from Montana State University here, and has over 15 years of professional experience in academia. Dr. Brazil's research spans Chinese history, culture, and identity, with a particular focus on cross-cultural communications, providing valuable insights into the experiences of Chinese international students and cross-cultural dynamics in educational settings. Dr. Brazil's selected publications in Chinese history and culture include the following, such as the co-author journal that I just mentioned, Coming Home to China, Margaret Wu's Story with Dr. Munday, a narrative inquiry into Chinese international doctoral students' journey, a strength-based perspective, and Chinese to English, translation, identifying problems and providing solution. So last but not least, Dr. John Carricker is a professor of earth sciences and geological engineering with Sun Yat-sen University in Guangzhou. Dr. Kerr has published extensively on the geology of China, but he has a strong family-inspired interest in the history and culture of the Pearl River Delta. This interest, along with a web of connections with local scholars, led to research and field trips with Munday and Brazil to investigate the many lure mentions built by overseas Chinese throughout the Delta. Dr. Kerr also led the creation of an exchange partnership between Sun Yat-sen University and Montana Tech, which included support for Butte's Meiwa Museum. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Munday and Dr. Brazil.
Well, thank you, Doris, for that great introduction. And also an acknowledgement to the Crow, Cheyenne, Salish, and Kootenai peoples that lived here for 10,000 years or more, and on whom beautiful land we reside and have our MSU campus today. So just a brief introduction overview of today's talk. The emphasis is on transnationalism. So for many Chinese who were excluded by the law of 1882, this didn't really apply, but certainly for the middle class and merchant class Chinese in America, they lived with their feet in two worlds. They often had families, they built homes, they had businesses in China as well as wherever they lived here in the United States. We're going to emphasize, kind of falsely, a sharp break that comes with the 1911 revolution and how Chinese Americans defined their identity. It's not as sharp a break as it might seem in the way we present it. My colleague Mark Johnson, for example, has done a lot of work on the Chinese Empire Reform Association. Clearly, there's a modernist transition that takes place well before the 1911 revolution. Also, Doris So's work shows that there's a lot happening with kind of redefining women and minorities, and the notion of modernity in China well before the revolution. That said, we're going to focus on three markers of this modern identity. One, building Lu mansions, that is, very nice homes in the home village of China. Emphasis on higher education, especially for young women, and as a marker of identity, the Cheongsam or Chapao dress. So we often talk in American history about the Chinese emigration prior to 1882, and we forget to focus on the Cantonese area. So it's not a Chinese migration so much as it is a Cantonese one. And even within that greater present-day province of Guangdong, with the city of Guangzhou or historical Canton, most of the several hundred Chinese who came to America before 1900 were not even from the big city, but they were from the rural counties, the Si or later the Wu-yi, the 5 counties, including Taishan and Kaiping. And we're going to focus on Kaiping a little bit just because that's where there was an American Lu mansion that we located. The Butte Chinese community certainly embraced the revolution. And again, alluding to my colleague Mark Johnson's work, Butte was a stronghold for the Chinese Empire Reform Association, not necessarily strongly in favor of an all-out revolution as occurred at Sun Yat-sen's leaders' hands in 1911, but when it occurred, the Butte Chinese community embraced it. So quoting local historian Richard Gibson here, the 1911 Chinese Revolution that overthrew the empire and established the republic was strongly supported by Butte's Chinese. Hung Fei was president of the local Chinese Republican organization. In March 1912, he and others celebrated the establishment of the republic by raising the new Chinese flag at the Republican headquarters at 20 West Galena Street, very close to about a block away from today's Meiwa Museum. And I should point out, we're not totally sure because of changes in provenance, but we think we have this original Chinese Republic flag that was flown at the Republican headquarters in Butte on display at the museum. One of the ways we see that sharp break artificially defined a bit with the 1911 revolution is how Chinese Americans dress. So you look through, dozens of photographs of Chinese families kind of pre-1911. Oftentimes, they're trying to conform to the Qing dynasty dress code. And for women and gowns, for women, not necessarily with bound feet, but then often wearing horsehoof shoes that restrict their mobility, cultural restrictions, women staying inside the house, and then of course for men shaving the front of their head, wearing a long queue, and again the traditional ropes. Butte Chinese American families very quickly dropped those Qing dynasty restrictions after 1911, as you see with the Hung Hua Long family portrait here from 1920. And I should point out, let's see, I think we have a laser pointer here,
Yes.
maybe. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to figure it out. But right in the center of the photo, standing up behind the child in the high chair, that's Rose Hum Lee. the rather famous American Chinese scholar who wrote about Butte Chinese history, but also history of and sociology of Chinese in the American West. We see this transition with the Chen family that originally owned the Meiwa Noodle Parlor and the Wachang Tai Mercantile. So Chen Hindun, the elder who established that business beginning in the 1880s and then with the building in 1899, greatly expanded in 1909. You see his passport documentation photo here from 1905, conforming to Qing Dynasty dress code. And then when his son, Qin Yifang, Americanized name Albert, goes to China in 1911 to take a bride, he's wearing Western dress. So we see this kind of identity through a shift from Chinese Qing Dynasty dress code to an American Western kind of way of dressing, pretty abruptly and almost completely 100% in any family or Chinese American photos in Butte after the Revolution. The other marker of modern identity are Lu mansions. And I use the term from Celia Tan, a Hong Kong University scholar who has extensively studied Lu mansions in the Pearl River Delta countryside and documented a lot of the architectural features there. They were built by overseas Chinese, not just Chinese Americans, but Chinese Canadians, Chinese living in Mexico or throughout the Pacific or even Europe. These Lu mansions were built in the home village, and we can see a transition, again, from around the time of the revolution in 1911, from fortress-like structures to much more comfortable homes that were a hybrid of Western and Eastern architectural features. So in the early period, we see these dailo, or kind of fortress or defensive towers, built by overseas Chinese. And if you go through the Pearl River Delta area today, there are hundreds of dailo towers that were built. Many of them now sit boarded up and vacant as the buildings that you see here. But then after 1911, we go from perhaps hundreds of these dailo fortress-like towers to thousands and thousands of Lu mansions, built with a kind of a hybrid architectural approach with both Chinese and American or Western architecture. Oftentimes, these were built in whole sort of village concentrations, so people whose families knew each other, perhaps they were related as cousins, built near each other and established pretty large settlements, sometimes with hundreds of houses, like the so-called Canadian village in Kaiping. And you can see some of the architectural details here as well. So for Shihua, Carrie, and I, our interest in the Lu mansions begins with our treks into the countryside, trying to identify the location of a Lu mansion built by the Wu family. And it was a biographical study that Shihua and I researched and co-authored. So the Wu Du Sing house was built as one of two twins houses about 1935. one by a brother from the American Midwest, and the neighboring house by his brother who had remained in China. These houses stand out even among the Lu mansions in the Pearl River Delta countryside, because instead of being built of concrete, which Sun Yat-sen and the new Republican government were pushing as the new construction material, these are red brick houses, perhaps echoing the red brick style that was so popular in the United States in the late 1800s or early 1900s. The Wu family, like many transnational merchant class American Chinese families, owned a lot of commercial properties in Kaiping and Canton, the present-day city of Guangzhou, as well as these houses that they built in the home village. The idea was that as the Wu elder got older, passed the business on to his children in the Midwest, that he and his wife would return to China to live. He ended up dying before that could occur, but his wife returned to China with their daughter, Margaret, and a girl who had come to America as at the age of only 2 in the early 1900s. And the mother, by all indications, loved being back in the home village, owning a rather prestigious, nice house. Her daughter was not so happy there, and that will take us to the next step in our Chinese-American markers of modernity, and that's higher education. We eventually, after a couple of failed field trips, tracked down this house. And you can see the front gate on the left here and one of the twin houses over on the right. Again, like many of the Lu mansions throughout the Pearl River Delta side, these houses are boarded up and vacant for a number of reasons today. One of them being that the Chinese countryside, the agricultural countryside in the Pearl River Delta, has largely depopulated as people have moved to larger cities for jobs and better economic opportunities. But when you look at the front gate or the houses here, you certainly see lots of, good feng shui kind of features, like the upturned corners of the roof that deflect negative energy, by the winding pathways that defy evil spirits that like straight lines, and you can't quite see it in these photos, but there's a large bamboo grove on each side of the houses, also to deflect negative energies, and the houses are facing to the very auspicious southern side. But then they also include a lot of Western features in addition to the red brick, such as the balconies to sit out on a hot, humid summer night. Lots of windows, so the interiors must have been very well lit. And then the houses had running water. They had a cistern up on the roof with water pumped up to it. To provide that running water. And even today, as we ask around in the countryside trying to find these houses, as soon as Shua would, in her very good Cantonese, say, we're looking for the red brick houses, people would light up and say, oh, you're looking for the red brick house. These houses are well known for the way that they stand out. So Margaret Wu, very unhappy back in the home village of Kaiping, writes in her diary when her mom tries to marry her off to a local village boy, in her very best Midwestern English, "I'm not having none of that." So she basically fled the house and enrolled at Lingnan University in the big city of Canton. So Lingnan had been established by American Presbyterian Church of Investments as the Canton Christian College in 1904, but by 1927, the control was handed over from an American governing board to a Chinese governing board, and Lingnan was very progressive. It had been coeducational from day one, but then in 1933 built a women's dormitory, and in 1935, 1936, sort of the peak of Lingnan, there were about 200 female students there. 5 were from the United States, including May Moitan Hum of Butte, and the woman that Shoa and I were studying, Margaret Wu of Minneapolis. Margaret Wu writes in her diary about the cosmopolitan nature of the other female students at Lingnan, and by far her favorite fellow students were the Hong Kong girls, who she called going around in Hollywood style in terms of their dress code, and it quite scandalized her that they would even go on dates with local boys without any supervision. Something that she thought the good Chinese or the good Chinese American girls would never do, at least she wouldn't. So Lingnan provided modern education with an international faculty and students, coeducational education, and also, much like the Wu houses, built in red brick. So we don't know how much this is an expression of American Chinese identity. It could also be an expression of what the British like to call red brick universities, that is, universities established for public education, as opposed to the old private schools like Oxford or Cambridge. Again, has that hybrid east-west architecture, and sadly closed with the Japanese invasion of 1937, and was subsequently integrated into Sun Yat-sen University, whereas the kind of papers or the charter of Lingnan University were taken to Taiwan. She's a Butte girl, was the parents of Yo Huang Hum and Bessie Wong Hum. They were co-founders of the Peking Noodle Parlor, still exists under family management in Butte today. And she left Lingnan in 1937 with the Japanese invasion, but then finished her undergraduate degree at Western Montana College here in Dillon. And as a newspaper account said, when she was married, she was the first Chinese girl born and reared in Montana to receive a college degree.
So I just want to give you some historical background about the Cheongsam or Qipao dresses. In 1911, the Republic of China was established, and on 1911, December 29, Sun Yat-sen was named the new president. So later, some very important historical event happened in 1919. The May 4th movement began, and really pushing for the social and cultural changes in China. So during the 1920s, Shanghai grew into a major fashion city, and at this time, the Qipao or Cheongsam quickly became popular and was accepted as the national dress of China. fashion changes quickly. The Chinese woman and Chinese American woman overseas embrace qipao and cheongsam as a symbol of modern style and grace. So let me show you an example of the qipao or cheongsam dresses from the Meiwa Museum here in Butte, Montana. And later we'll talk more about this collection as well. So as you can see in the images here, qipao is known for its high color and sophisticated design. So some linguistic background here. The term qipao and cheongsam both refers to the same traditional Chinese dress, but they have different language and context specific. So qipao is the Mandarin Chinese version for the dress, and is more commonly used in Mandarin-speaking communities and mainland China. So qipao comes originally from the Manchu ethnic group, and they actually popularized the more early loose version of the dress during the Qing dynasty. Cheongsam, on the other hand, is the Cantonese version, and it's more commonly used in Hong Kong and among Cantonese-speaking communities. So cheongsam literally actually means long garment in Chinese. And you can actually see in the picture that the qipao and cheongsam dress embrace the Art Deco design, which is very popular during the period of 1920 and 1930s. Let me show you a few examples from this collection in Butte, Montana, Meiwa Museum. So over time, the design evolved when women in cities like Shanghai began to wear a more fitted version of qipao that captures their figure in the late 1920s. It combines both the Chinese elements with Western tailoring, giving women more freedom for movement. And also worth mentioning is the qipao dress usually features a slit on one side on the bottom, and it's made from silk or other fine fabrics with very detailed, sophisticated design. The traditional knotted button you can see on top here for each of these dresses are known as pankou. So they refer to a traditional decorative button or knot used in qipao. And these buttons serve both as a functional and decorative purpose. Okay, so about the qipao collection, we are very, very grateful for a woman named Margaret Wood that we're going to talk more in detail here. So Doris mentioned that Dr. Munday and I published a peer-reviewed article which influenced the earlier of this talk that Dr. Munday talked about, that Lou mentioned. And that article take about 5 to 6 years of making. We interviewed Margaret Wu, her daughter Honey Wu, and all her families in Minneapolis. So if you want to know more about that, we can share the article with you. Briefly, Margaret Wu, she's amazing Chinese American woman. So when she was born in China in 1912, and she came to the U.S. when she was only 2 years old with her parents. She came actually from a middle-class merchant family and was part of the overseas Chinese community. So Margaret Wu, with her family, they also built a house in Kaiping, a mansion called the Lu Mansion in 1935. The next year, 1936, Margaret Wu studied at Ningnan College in Guangzhou, which now is part of the Shinyashan University, where my co-author, Carrie Zhang Ke, was a full professor there. And in 1937, Margaret Wu just left to come to the US right before the Japanese invasion. So when she returned to the US, she brought 30 beautiful cheongsam or qipao dresses that she personally made for her. And so as a typical Chinese young woman, much like the Qing family from the Meiwa Museum, they were very transnational. And I remember in some of the journal that she wrote about the qipao and the interview that we conducted with her daughter and her family, she talked about, the qipao as a symbol of Chinese culture and elegance, representing both the traditional and modern aspect of Chinese women's fashion. And this next slide, also some of you will recognize the first image here was taken in 1915 when Sun Yat-sen and Song Qingling got married, and the second picture was taken in 1927 when Chiang Kai-shek and Song Mei-lin they got married. So why do we share this picture? Because the first one, in 1915, Sun Yat-sen, the first president of the Republic of China, married Song Qingling on this first image. And then the second image, right, Chiang Kai-shek, a nationalist leader, married her sister, Song Mei-lin. Now, in both weddings, you recognize that the couple were actually wearing Western-style clothing, which means that they have already rejected the Qing dynasty restrictions. And I really like to talk about the Song sisters. So there were 3 of them, and the oldest sister is not in the picture here, and they all have very different political views and personality. So later we're going to show how they wear qipao dress differently. And some background information, so Song Ai-ning, who was not in the picture here, is the oldest sister. She actually married a very wealthy businessman, and then she was able to support Song Qingling and Song Mei-lin in their political activities. So Song Qingling married Sun Yat-sen, and Song Mei-lin married Chiang Kai-shek, as you can see here. But people talk about them in political aspect, and today we're going to focus on how they wore the qipao dress differently, because the qipao becomes iconic in Chinese culture, and I think really thanks to also these important women promoting these dresses to embrace both the elegance and strength for Chinese women, not just in China but overseas. So on this side you can see that Song Qingling, so her dress was more of simple style, and she wore more loose-fitted qipao, reflecting really her modest but also serious personality. And in some way, when you look at a lot of the qipao that she's wearing, she was more conservative but still within that qipao style. Now, in contrast, her youngest sister, Song Mei-lin, she was identified as kind of a little bit of a fashion play. She loves to wear the qipao that are more sophisticated style, but also captures her figure. And often they both wear qipao with high heels. And a lot of the qipao that she wears are also very detailed design, reflecting her very expensive taste style, but also the qipao dress really speak to the next one that we're going to talk about, anime one. So anime one and Song Mei-lin sometimes has similar qipao styles. And anime one was a well-known Hollywood actress, so she wore qipao a lot in her movies in the 1920s and 1930s. So by wearing it, she really showcased that pride in the Chinese cultural heritage, but also she is popularizing qipao as a way to challenge the stereotype that women can be independent and women have their own identities. Now, in some, qipao becomes, and game is legendary status, especially, starting from Shanghai at that time. As I shared earlier, some historical background, Shanghai was a hub of fashion and culture. And during that time, Shanghai was also famous for its Art Deco building, skyscrapers, and jazz club. It was a city for creativity and fashion. So qipao was not just something that Chinese women wear, but it also representing itself in calendars, posters, advertisements, novels, and films. And oftentimes, Chinese women and Chinese American women overseas, they wear qipao really to make a political statement, symbolize the freedom that women have and represent some kind of modality during that time. So in some way, you can even call it a kind of feminism, symbolizing women's independence and progress. So our final thoughts on qipao is that qipao is really not just a dress. It was not merely wear, but it's a performance and a semiotic object. Nowadays, for practical reasons, you don't see a lot of young Chinese women wear qipao all over mainland China, but they do wear them in very important festivals and weddings. Also, as a challenge to the traditional Confucian value, and earlier we talked about the political statement of freedoms. So on the screen here, I actually have a collection of this. You see the two girls poster here, and this was very popular for the calendars at that time. And the girls wear qipao, and we actually have one image from the Meiwa Museum here, the historical prints of Chinese women in these Cheongsam dresses, and I was able to show you the picture here.
Just as a quick conclusion then, so about the way that Chinese Americans after 1911 really embrace this new kind of era, both politically, but then in terms of how they reflect and demonstrate their own identity. So whether that's through Lu mansions back in the home village, or for Chinese American daughters, higher education, and the Cheongsam dress. Okay, thank you.